Chapter 1. The cabin stood alone, nestled in the woods, far from civilization. It was a picturesque place, the kind of location people would dream of for a weekend getaway. However, the locals whispered tales of its cursed past, tales that no one believed until they found themselves standing at its door, ready to unlock whatever horrors lay inside. The sun was a distant memory as Jenna and Mark pulled up to the cabin, the last remnants of daylight swallowed by the thickening woods. Mark turned off the engine, and silence enveloped them, the kind of silence that wraps around you like a shroud, heavy and oppressive. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Jenna asked, peering into the darkening tree line. "Yeah, it's perfect," Mark replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just think of the Instagram posts we can make. Living our best lives." He mimicked the voice of influencers trying to lighten the mood. "Right, because nothing says living your best life like being isolated in the woods," Jenna shot back, but she couldn't suppress a smile. She was excited, despite the chilling tales whispered by townsfolk at the gas station. They grabbed their bags and trudged up the creaky porch steps, the wood groaning beneath them, as if protesting their presence. Mark fumbled with the key, and the door swung open with an ominous creak, revealing a dimly lit interior. "Wow," Jenna breathed, stepping inside. The cabin was charming in a rustic way, complete with a stone fireplace and wooden beams. Yet there was something off about it. The air felt thick, weighed down by an unseen presence that made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. "Let's get a fire going," Mark suggested, trying to shake off the creeping unease. He stepped toward the fireplace, but as he reached for the matches, something caught Jenna's eye, a shadow darting past the window. "Did you see that?" she exclaimed, her heart racing. "See what?" Mark replied, distracted by the kindling. "Something like a figure just outside," she said, her voice trembling. "It's just your imagination. You've been reading too many horror stories," he chuckled, but the laugh was hollow, echoing off the cabin walls. As night fell, the shadows grew longer, deeper. The couple roasted marshmallows over the fire, but Jenna couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and every now and then, a faint whisper seemed to float through the air, too soft to decipher. "Okay, that's it. I'm going to check outside," Jenna said, rising from her seat. "Don't be stupid. It's pitch black out there," Mark protested, but Jenna was already reaching for the door. "Fine, I'll be right back," she said, stepping into the chill of the night. The woods were alive with the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As she ventured into the darkness, the shadows danced menacingly around her. Each step felt like an invitation to the unknown, and the trees loomed over her like silent guardians of a sinister secret. "Jenna!" Mark's voice called from the cabin, panic lacing his tone. "Just a second," she yelled back, but her curiosity drove her deeper into the woods. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing, moonlight illuminating a patch of ground littered with old rusted tools and scraps of what looked like clothing. A chill ran down her spine as she recognized one of the scraps, a tattered shirt with a faded logo of a band they had seen in concert years ago. "Mark!" she screamed, fear coursing through her veins. As if on cue, the wind picked up, howling through the trees, and the whispers returned, louder now, swirling around her like a malevolent storm. Panic surged as she turned to run back to the cabin, but the shadows morphed into figures, blocking her path. "Help!" she cried out, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. Mark burst through the cabin door, flashlight in hand, and when he saw the clearing, his face drained of color. "What the hell is this?" "I don't know," Jenna screamed, her voice breaking. "We need to leave, now!" But the figures were closing in, their faces obscured by darkness. Yet their intentions were clear. Mark grabbed Jenna's wrist, pulling her back toward the cabin, but the shadows moved with them, relentless and hungry. Inside the cabin, Mark locked the door, his hands trembling. "We're safe in here," he reassured her, though the quiver in his voice betrayed his fear. "Are we?" Jenna snapped, pointing at the window. "Look!" A face pressed against the glass, twisted and grotesque, its mouth stretching into a smile too wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Mark stepped back, horror flooding his features as more faces joined the first, their eyes gleaming with malice. Jenna, what the hell are they? They were just stories, she shouted. But the reality of their situation was crashing down around them. The whispers grew louder, coiling around them, wrapping tighter until they could barely breathe. "Let us in! Let us in!" they chanted, a cacophony of voices that clawed at their sanity. "Get away from the windows!" Mark shouted, but it was too late. The figures began to claw at the wood, their fingers splintering the frame as they pressed closer, hungry for flesh. "Mark, what do we do?" Jenna cried, backing away until she hit the wall. "Hold on!" Mark shouted, grabbing the fire poker. He swung it wildly at the figures, but it passed through them like smoke. No resistance, no impact. "Mark!" Jenna screamed as the door shuddered under the weight of their tormentors. "We need to escape!" Mark grabbed Jenna's hand, pulling her toward the back door. But the shadows were already there, merging into a single mass, solidifying into a writhing, monstrous being. "Let us in!" it roared, the sound reverberating through the cabin, shaking the walls until dust fell from the ceiling. "Run!" Mark shouted. But as they turned to flee, the creature lashed out, its clawed hands sweeping through the air, catching Mark and sending him crashing to the ground. "Mark!" Jenna cried, rushing to his side. But the creature was upon them, its teeth glistening with anticipation. In that moment, everything slowed. Jenna could see the glint of the moonlight on the creature's teeth, the way it savored their fear. Mark's eyes widened in terror as the creature lunged, and Jenna screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the woods. The last thing she saw was the creature's mouth opening wide, and then darkness enveloped her, swallowing her screams whole. Chapter 2. The following morning, the sun cast a deceptive warmth over the woods, but the cabin felt like a tomb. The door hung ajar, creaking ominously in the breeze, and the birds sang their usual morning tunes, unaware of the horrors that had unfolded. A pair of hikers, oblivious to the cabin's dark past, stumbled upon the scene. "What's that smell?" one of them, a lanky man named Tom, asked as they approached the cabin. The air was thick with a sickly sweetness that made their stomachs churn. "Probably just some trash," his friend Lisa shrugged. "Let's check it out." As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The sunlight barely penetrated the gloom, and the walls seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. Lisa's eyes widened as she spotted the remnants of last night's horror. Scattered belongings, a blood-stained shirt, and a trail of crimson leading towards the fireplace. "Oh God," she gasped, covering her mouth. "What happened here?" Tom edged closer, his curiosity piqued despite the foreboding sense of dread. "It's probably just a prank or something. Look, there are no bodies." But as they moved further into the cabin, they found the truth hidden beneath the surface. The floorboards creaked underfoot, whispering secrets of the past. "What the hell is that?" Tom pointed toward the fireplace, where a charred, gnarled hand lay among the ashes, its fingers curled in a final grasp. Lisa recoiled, her stomach churning. "We should leave, now!" But before they could turn back, a low growl echoed through the cabin, reverberating off the walls like a threat. The air grew heavy, and shadows danced in the corners of their vision, twisting and writhing like something alive. "Did you hear that?" Tom whispered, his voice trembling. "Let's just go," Lisa urged. But as they turned, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Panic surged through them as they pounded on the door, but it held firm, mocking their desperation. "What the hell is happening?" Tom shouted, fear creeping into his voice. Suddenly, the growling intensified, morphing into a cacophony of voices, echoes of the past, lost souls trapped in the cabin's dark embrace. "Let us in," they chanted, a twisted chorus that sent chills down their spines. Tom and Lisa backed away, their eyes darting around the cabin for an escape. "We need to find a window," Tom yelled, but the walls seemed to close in around them, constricting their movements like a vice. The shadows coalesced into a figure, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You're not leaving," it hissed, the voice dripping with malice. "Who are you?" Lisa shouted, her heart racing. "What do you want?" The figure leaned closer, its breath cold against their skin. "You are the next offerings," it whispered, and with a flick of its wrist, the cabin erupted into chaos. The walls trembled as the floorboards splintered, and the very foundation of the cabin seemed to come alive. Tom and Lisa stumbled backward, their fear palpable as they realized they were trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. "No! We can't die here!" Tom screamed, but the figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the cabin like a death knell. As the shadows lunged forward, consuming them in a swirling mass of darkness, the last thing they heard was the sound of their own screams, swallowed by the abyss. Chapter 3. Back in town, the news spread like wildfire. The cabin, once a charming getaway, had turned into a haunted relic, a place where the lost souls gathered to reclaim their vengeance. Weeks went by, but the stories only grew more twisted, more gruesome. The locals avoided the woods, whispering about the cabin that had become a feeding ground for dark forces. But then came a group of thrill seekers, lured by the tales of horror, adrenaline pumping through their veins. They arrived at dusk, laughing and joking, blissfully unaware of the darkness that awaited them. "Let's show this cabin who's boss," one of them shouted, kicking the door open with a bravado that masked their fear. As they stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted once more, the air thick with the ghosts of the past. "Is this place really haunted?" one of the girls asked, her voice trembling despite her bravado. "Of course not. It's just a cabin," another laughed. But their laughter faded as they took in the remnants of those who had come before them. The shadows stirred, stretching out like tendrils, reaching for the newcomers. "Let us in," they whispered, the voices of the lost echoing through the cabin. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, trapping the group inside. Panic surged as they rushed to the windows, but the glass held firm, mocking their desperation. "What the hell is going on?" one of the boys shouted, his voice cracking with fear. The shadows coalesced once more, forming the figure of the creature that had haunted the cabin for years. "You are here for the feast," it hissed, its eyes glinting with anticipation. "No! We just wanted to have fun!" one of the girls cried, her back pressed against the wall as the figure advanced. The creature's laughter echoed, a sound filled with malice and hunger. "You are the next offerings," it declared, and the cabin trembled as the shadows surged forward, engulfing the group in darkness. Screams filled the air, a symphony of terror that resonated through the woods, but the forest remained silent, a witness to the horrors that unfolded within the cabin. And as the sun rose the next day, casting light on the cabin once more, it stood as a monument to the darkness that lay within, a reminder that some getaways lead only to nightmares, and some doors should never be opened. In the end, the cabin was left alone once again, its secrets buried beneath the weight of the forest, waiting for the next unsuspecting souls to stumble upon its cursed threshold, to become the next victims of its insatiable hunger.